Hey, this is Doc David with Head Shrink Inc. and Dan Bates is here with me today, and we're going to talk about unconditional and conditional love and how it affects your parenting and your kids. Listen in.
You are listening to Head Shrink Inc., your answers to life, relationships, and daily living.
Hey, how's it going, Dan Bates?
Oh, hey. Great.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Head Shrink Inc. I'm Doc David, and Dan Bates, my bro therapist, is here. Therabro is here. And
That's right.
the summer, I was just thinking about this, the summer.
I'm the head, you're the shrink.
That's right. I'm the shrinky head. You the head shrink? Yeah, one of those two.
Yeah.
So time is a constant, but it feels relative because I'm thinking we're almost done with summer.
Right.
School starting back up.
Right.
And I'm excited for the fall, but it's a little bit depressing to think, oh man, all the nice warm weather is about to leave. Like all the camping and eating raspberries. And
I mean, fall is great though. Autumn? You don't like autumn? Still sunny.
Here's what I like about autumn. I like the days that there's dusk, right? So the light is there longer, and then it's warm, and then it's just kind of. I like that.
I like
in the
that
fall.
too. I like you.
Oh, that's sweet of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I like you too. All right, on to what we're going to talk about today. From that awkward moment. So so a lot of times, we've written a book called When Parenting Backfires, and there's various chapters about some things that parents do that create problems in their relationships with their kids and that have bad outcomes. And so we've talked about, written about these errors and how they backfire and then ways that you can correct them. So today we want to talk about the chapter in the book is called I Love You Conditionally, which is kind of self-explanatory that it's basically you've heard as a parent that you're supposed to have unconditional love towards your kids. And I often think, well, does that mean even if they've murdered somebody, do you still love your child? And I think you still love your child. I guess you don't like what they did, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you ever imagine a situation where you wouldn't love your child anymore?
No.
Like they killed your wife?
No, I think I would always love, but the mistake I've seen parents make is love then gets conflated with no standards.
Yes, that's true. So this error, so the thinking error here is instead of loving unconditionally, there's conditions put on. A parent has conditional love. So that could be anything from, I think it's based on behavior mostly, right? Like if you behave a certain way, then you garner my love and my affection and my connection. Right? That's the idea. And we're saying that is a very inappropriate, ineffective way to love your kid. There should be unconditional love for your child, but within that there should be boundaries and expectations and reasonable expectations, I think. Right. We talked about there's a guy named Gottman. Tell me about Gottman.
So Gottman is a psychologist and researcher at the University of Washington. Him and his wife too, she's a researcher. And he is the founder of what has been coined as the Love Lab. Yeah. And it's essentially, he created a research environment where he would stick couples in some housing unit, and he would basically have every square inch of that housing unit recorded. And so what he would do is he would put couples in there for a weekend and just monitor every single thing they did, every conversation, every fight. And then when they would have fights, he would code every single detail of the fight.
Now, did they have, didn't they have like things hooked up to them too to determine their heart rate?
Oh yeah, maybe. So then what he would do is he he would analyze how the couples would communicate and fight, and then he would monitor them in terms of like relationship outcomes. Did they stay together? Were they satisfied with their relationship? Did they divorce? Was it, all this stuff? And so he, based on that research, he made several observations about basically how relationships work and how they break down.
Within a 90, and he could predict within what? 98%?
Yeah, so that's another interesting fact about Gottman is he got so good at analyzing couples and how they communicate and fight. Based on a 15-minute interview, he could predict if the couple was going to stay together or get divorced to a 94% degree of certainty.
Well, that's pretty good. It's pretty good certainty.
Not bad, Gottman.
So the idea in this chapter is that when you try to motivate your child with love and a relational connected based on whether they have good or bad behavior, this is what's gonna backfire. And I would say that's not just not just with kids. It's also if you're married to somebody and you're motivating them, and the only way that if they do what you want them to do, then you love them and show them love.
So let's get into the thinking error, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is what you just said, right? Like
right.
The parent, there's behavioral issues with the kid. And so what the parent does is they try to motivate their kid to good behavior, not a bad thing, but the motivation they're using, the incentive they're using is relationship with them.
Yeah.
And that backfires. And so how does it backfire?
So I think what happens, so you want your kid to, let's say, do well at school. Mm-hmm. You want your kid to go to school. And so you say to them, I don't even know if you say it to them. For some parents, it might just kind of be, it's what you do. It's how you interact. And I think that's where the thinking error comes, because you don't think about it. You just kind of do it.
Exactly.
And so the kid doesn't go to school, and therefore you, as the parent, you have this interaction with them where you don't do things for them. Let's say, if they go to school, then you speak to them in a loving way. You give them hugs. You do for them, basically. But if they don't do this thing that you're wanting them to do, then your response is to cut off emotional connection with them. Right. You don't hug them. You don't interact with them. You don't talk to them pleasantly. You're just cut off, basically, from them in an emotional way. Right. And so Gottman, I think you had talked about Gottman has 3 different connection types. Right. And so then he broke it down into 3 different connection types. So the first is turning towards someone's bid. Now, someone's bid is what? So
a bid for connection is very broad in how it's defined, but it really could be anything. It could be as simple as me saying hello, to me texting someone, to me, I'm at the grocery store and I got my wife her favorite candy when I came home. So it's basically a way of looking at behavior that has a relational explanation to it. I went to the grocery store and got my wife candy, not just because there and it was convenient and just happenstance, but I did it because I wanted to get some connection with my wife, so it was a bid. Right.
So these connection bids are happening every day with all sorts of people in all sorts of ways.
Bid as like the metaphor, right? Like you're bidding, like you're at an auction. Yeah. You're bidding for a car or livestock or something. We do that on like a micro level with relationship. Yeah. We make bids for connection with each other.
So his first connection bid is turning towards someone. Do you have an example of a turning towards someone bid?
Yeah, so like I go to the grocery store and I get my wife the Reese's Pieces candy. And I come home and like I say, "Oh, hey honey, I got the groceries and look, I got you this candy." And then she says, "Well, this didn't happen. This is just a scenario. I did get her the candy though." And she says, "Well, did you get the tomato sauce?" I said, "Well, oh no, sorry, I forgot that." And then all she focuses on is the tomato sauce and how I didn't get it, and totally misses my bid for connection with the Reese's Pieces.
But let's talk. So what's a turning toward bid?
Oh, sorry. So turning toward So I come home.
Reciprocated.
Yeah, I come home and I bring her. I say, I got the groceries and here's the Reese's Pieces. And instead of just saying, "Oh, you can leave it on the counter," or she just takes it and eats it, she says, "Oh, that was so thoughtful, thank you."
Right.
And then it initiates this reciprocal pattern where we're kind of connecting, like we're having conversation
in a positive way.
In a positive way. Maybe she then next time gets me like an espresso drink that I wanted but I didn't ask for. So it's this positive thing that feeds on itself and leads to really good outcomes in relationships.
Right. And so in a parenting relationship, it could be something as simple as your kid, without being asked, does a chore for you. And so then you respond, "Wow, that was really great that you did that chore. I really appreciated it."
Yeah.
And so that is potentially a bid for a connection from your kid to you, and being positive back is a way to enhance that positive connection with the kid.
And we'll get into the reasons why it's important to do it. We're just talking about what it is now, but it's almost like you want two perspectives. It's like just the surface level stuff that goes through life, and then there's also the relational level. And so if your kid does something above and beyond, that's something to pay attention to versus just assuming that's how it should be. They should be doing above and beyond.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They live in this house for free, so they should do it. Okay, so the second type of bid for a connection is called turning against. Now, I think that's what you were referring to earlier.
Yeah, like let's say, well, kind of, yeah. So let's say like, I keep thinking of marriage examples, but I'll give it a marriage example and then a kid example.
I'll give a kid example.
Okay. So like, I have a friend who, he was telling me recently, like his wife was out to work and he was home. So he cleaned the whole house, did all the dishes, did the laundry, just like went over the top and like mopped the floors.
What an idiot.
What a dummy. But like they have a pretty equal share of the chores, but he did his and hers.
Oh. And
just as a gesture to say, "I love you, honey," something like that.
So that would have been a connection bid.
Right. And so she comes home, sees all that, and gets mad about some small thing that wasn't done.
Was this real? This was you, really? Wasn't it?
No, this was my friend. I won't name names.
Asking for a friend.
Because my friend's confidential. This was a friend. This was a real friend.
Okay.
It
wasn't me.
The Reese's Pieces was me.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so then the turning against is an example of...
But you got your kid example. What's the kid?
Oh, yeah. So the teenager does his chore, like previously, making the bid attempt towards dad or mom or whoever. Dad or mom see that chore and then get on the kid's case because they didn't do one of the chores the exact right way they were supposed to do it. So you can see that the kid makes the attempt for a bid, for a connection, and then the parent completely misses it and focuses on something that, rather than focusing on the relationship, like, wow, here's my kid. Yeah, he didn't do it right, but he made an attempt to do it. Yeah. And that, you can see where that's going to create problems. And same in a relationship. I've
got another example of, I was working with a family and there's kind of a negative communication pattern between the kid and the parents. Mm-hmm. So I worked with them and I got the kid to kind of use a more healthy way of sharing his feelings. And so the kid kind of took a risk and was vulnerable and shared what he felt instead of just, being rude. And the parent just totally didn't even, she corrected him for how he could have done it better.
Right.
And to me, it was just like, no wonder he doesn't want to try and share more effectively or honestly or vulnerably, because he just gets you correcting him. And so that was something I brought to the parents' attention, is he just made a really good effort to connect with you and do something that was kind of outside his comfort zone, and you corrected him instead of praising him.
Yeah, what I've seen a lot when that when that kind of specific behavior happens consistently, it's usually tied into what I've seen is a parent who does that to their child. Usually that parent has had some type of experience with an alcoholic parent, right? Nothing is ever good enough
Mm-hmm.
And so that parent, because they're just kind of used to that, nothing is ever good enough, they pass that on to their kids. So their kid makes that connection attempt, and the parent doesn't respond appropriately. They respond in a way, well, yeah, I see that you did it, but you didn't do it well enough. So a third type of response to a bid connection is, in Gottman's words, it's called turning away.
Right.
A person makes a bid for a connection, and the other person's response is distance. So in the teenage example, it'd be teenage son does his chore, his dad or mom asks him to do, plus they do an extra one. And dad sees the chore and just doesn't make any comment. He just sees it and doesn't give him praise or doesn't give him, doesn't thank him or anything like that.
Right.
So I think similarly in using your example of Reese's Pieces with your wife, what would turning away potentially look
So
like?
I come home and I get the groceries and I get the Reese's Pieces and I say, hey, honey, we've got the groceries and oh, look, I got your favorite candy. And, just doesn't say anything at all or acts indifferently or then brings up a different subject. And so, it's like, oh, I just put myself out there and then, you don't respond. You don't pick it up. So then it leaves the bidder confused and maybe worried about, oh, is there an issue or did I do something wrong? And it never gets explained or resolved.
So I think that word confusion is great because, out of the 3 connection attempts, obviously one's the appropriate way to do it, like the turning towards, but that takes some work because maybe you had a bad day or maybe that's just not kind of your style. But when it comes to kids, and when it comes to kids specifically, I think we as parents need to pay attention to that because we're supposed to be raising them up in a place where they can launch from in an effective way. And if we're always kind of harassing them and critiquing them and pointing out their flaws, they're going to take that out with them into the real world. They're going to want to leave, our little incubation place sooner than maybe they should. So in loving conditionally, you should never make a relational connection dependent on good behavior. Now that's hard to do because speaking as a parent, it's hard when my kid or daughter don't do what I want them to do. It's hard to stay pleased and happy with them at times.
So I think there's a distinction that you're bringing up is difficult to do.
Okay.
But it's necessary, and I think what effective parents do it really well. And that's why it's like, it's kind of like, what was it, when the Supreme Court was trying to make a ruling on pornography, and he's like, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like good parents. It's like, I don't know how to really, I guess I do know how to define it, but it's like, defining good parenting can be hard sometimes, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And this is when I see a good parent, this is what I see them doing, which is always maintaining a basis of love and regard and respect for their kid, but that doesn't rule out behavior correction or disappointment or disapproval of certain behaviors. Like, I love you, but I disapprove of this behavior.
Yeah.
And I've seen it play out so many times, and there's a case that really stands out in my head where a kid was just killing himself basically to win the love of his parent, and this parent just couldn't do it because they couldn't get past the bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's like the bad behavior doesn't create a barrier to your love. You still love your kid. You're still rooting for them and hoping for good things for them and trying to build skills and encourage them. But at times, but you can still disapprove of what they do.
I've seen that with, maybe you've seen it too, where you try to talk to parents about that and they cannot.
They can't separate.
They cannot stop talking about. So you just want to say that what his behavior is okay? Doesn't someone need to point out that what he's doing is wrong? And I would say yes. Obviously the behavior that the kid is doing is wrong, but I think it's the challenge for the parent is to be able to acknowledge that that's wrong behavior, but still love the kid,
Right.
even though the wrong behavior is there. And I think that's where, you did this bad behavior, so then I'm going to turn off my love connection towards you until you do what I want you to do.
Right.
So we just had an interesting conversation today with another therapist about a case, and doing a case staffing where two specific topics got brought up that potentially relate to, that are potentially the outcome of conditional love parenting. One, I'll say one, and you say the other. One is cutting, right? And the other one is
eating disorders.
Right? Yeah. So both of those things that we run into often working with teens, and I think what you find with both those orders is that there's a lot of control that goes in. So kids that are in homes where they feel controlled, or where they're not feel, I mean, where they are controlled, because feeling controlled and actually being controlled potentially are two different things. But where kids are controlled, I don't know, that would be a good discussion, right? Because if you feel controlled, are you controlled?
I mean, it's like when you're doing assessments, it's always like actual or perceived.
Yeah.
So you may not be actually controlled, like the parent may not be strapping you down to the bed, but you feel controlled, you perceive control. It's kind of like women in DVA situations, they perceive the threat of abuse or, life-threatening threats, or, it's perception, which is just as tangible or has the same impact.
So I think a lot of times in homes where there's that control, rigidity, or this kind of turning off of love, or conditional love, is that kids will do extreme things to kind of test their parents' love limits, right? So if I do this cutting behavior, I can control it. My parents can't control it. But then I think also there's this will my parent love me even though I'm cutting on myself?
The secret love test.
Right. Will my parents still love me if I make myself throw up?
Well, so I think what happens is you try to cajole the parent into loving you.
Yeah.
By either hurting yourself or others, or you don't, it's because it's like, the normal avenues for love and connection aren't working. You're making bids and they're turning against you or away from you. So it's like, okay, that's not working. So I gotta,
you get extreme.
I gotta go
turn it up a notch.
Yeah, I gotta do drugs or cut myself or sleep around or just anything to get their attention. Because if I have their attention, then there's the possibility of love.
Right.
But if they're not even paying attention to me, or the attention they are giving to me is harmful, it's like I'm gonna push back or do something extreme, basically.
I think what happens is that, like, that extreme behavior creates more control attempts by the parents.
In some cases, or it creates more distance, like they just write them off totally.
And so then I think the self-fulfilling prophecy is that the kid does this extreme behavior and the parent says, wow, I'm really going to be distant from this kid. And so then the kid, again, just turns it up another level, runs away, gets connected with sketchy friends. Right. And so then by the time you try to, you as the parent snap out of it and think, I got to do something different. A lot of times it's too late because the kids are, they're in with their group of friends, and these people really understand me and love me unconditionally. You don't, and so why would I ever want to go back to you, mom and dad?
Yeah, it's like when we start working with families, we're at the end point where it's like so messy and there's so many. So when we come in with our suggestion about, love not being dependent on good behavior, it's like, what? What are you talking about?
Look how bad they are. You just don't understand.
Yeah, it's like, why? Who is this crazy person calling themselves a therapist? But once you untangle all the messiness and get down to like the core issue, that's where the problem lies. Is it started small. The kid got the message from parent that A, my bids of connection aren't working, and B, I only get love when I do this behavior they like. So it's not even me they love or care about. It's just this thing I do.
Right. And it's not, so again, I would say it's not just the kid that's creating these problems. It's kind of a combination of parenting that is ineffective.
Well, that's the message they're receiving
right, but
from the parent.
Right, but that's not, like, we as therapists, we go in and we see it completely different is how we see it. Anything else you want to add to that? So
what's the solution? I don't think we've got...
Well, I mean, I think that the solution is don't do it.
Just stop it.
It's that easy.
Stop
well, I mean, I think it's first is recognizing, okay, am I doing this parenting, this love, unconditional love, conditional love thing? And that's what I think a therapist is going to, hopefully you have a good therapist who's going to be able to clearly identify it. And then I think you need to trust them that they actually know what they're talking about. And so if you can identify it as having conditional love, then I think specifically with your kid, I mean, because there's different ways to handle it with your spouse, but I think specifically with your kid is that you have to purposefully approach them differently in regards to the bad behavior that they do or the bad choices that they make.
Yeah, I think the solution is making that distinction between my love for them and then my correcting bad behavior or my approval of bad behavior. I'll give you an example. It's a side example, but when there's communication issues with couples or families, one thing I work on is acknowledgement doesn't equate agreement. So you can acknowledge what the other person is feeling without agreeing with their position. And I think that's a distinction, right? Like you're still giving the person respect while respectfully disagreeing.
Yeah.
And that maintains a level of respect in the conversation. I think it's the same thing with this issue that we're talking about is you still love the kid and you're in their corner and you're rooting for them and you're supporting them, and at the same time you disagree or you disapprove of the behavior. Mm-hmm. So let's say your kid is having promiscuous unprotected sex. It's not like, get out of here, you whore, you're a terrible kid, you can't stay at my house if you do that. It's like, I love you fiercely and I will always be there for you and support you, but I can't support this behavior.
Yeah.
I support you and I see you growing into this amazing adult someday, but this behavior that you're doing right now scares me, concerns me, and I can't promote it. I can't support it. So, and I think that sends a really powerful message to the kid. It's not me, my identity, who I am as a person that my parent disagrees with or disapproves of. They love me and they see all these good things in me. But when I act out sexually or when I go use drugs or sell drugs, it's that behavior that isn't good, and for all these reasons that they're out.
I'm trying to think of an easy formula for it. So it's unconditional love plus appropriate consequences equal good parenting style.
Yeah, like if we were the love and logic people, we would say natural logical consequences. Conditional
love plus, which is a punishment, I think, in itself, plus punishment. So it's basically punishment plus emotional punishment plus physical punishment equals messed up kids.
There you go.
Right? I mean, well, like that's because when you do the conditional love thing, that's an emotional punishment that you're putting upon your kid. And so if you do that emotional punishment, plus then you say, and you're grounded for 2 weeks, right? That's two kinds of punishments where before it's, I love you unconditionally, which is not a punishment, but there's going to have to be consequences, or there's going to have to be consequences to your behavior.
Yeah, like in the book we talk about. I just had it in my brain and now I lost it. That's not good.
Maybe you should read the book.
Maybe I should read it. But basically, I remember now. So I think you wouldn't deprive your kid of food or water if they acted out. Like, I mean, like no dinner tonight or whatever. Yeah, but in the long term, you're not going to stop food and water because they're acting poorly.
Right.
Like when my daughter doesn't, like she does something she's not supposed to. It's not like, okay, you lose food privileges.
Right.
No, you still feed your kid. And I think for me as a therapist, I would put food and then emotional needs really on like the same level almost, like as the hierarchy of basic needs, Maslow. I would say love and emotional connection is a basic human need, and it's not a bargaining chip. So it's not like, oh, you behaved poorly, you wouldn't take food away and you wouldn't take emotional needs away either. There's an example of a girl named Jeannie who was kept in a cage her whole life, and then people discovered her later in adolescence and saved her, and she had all these issues, but one of the main issues is that she had emotional deprivation for years, and she was so limited in her capacity as just basic human functions. But she was fed, right? So she had food and water, but she didn't have emotional needs met, and she was severely underdeveloped. So let's not do that to our kids too. Not obviously we're not going to do that in the extreme form, but we do it on these micro levels where we make love a bargaining chip versus this basic standard need that they get regardless of their behavior.
And the outcome then is you get a kid becoming extreme and doing extreme things just to get you to show them love.
Right.
But then we as parents say, well, the kid's the one with the problem, not we're not.
Exactly.
The parent one with the
And
problem.
that's the wrong-headed way of looking at it.
All right, so that is from the book When Parenting Backfires, 12 Thinking Errors that you are
That undermine
parent effectiveness. Yes. And so would love you to check that book out on Amazon. Dan Bates, where can we find you on the webs?
You can check me out at danielbates.co. That's my website that's got blogs, podcasts, books, articles, etc.
Okay. And you can find me on davidsimonson.net and on Facebook at Doc David. Thanks for listening in. We'd love for you to recommend the podcast to anybody that you think would be helped from it. Thanks a lot.